I'll tell you what this game reminds me of. It's them old Space Raiders crisps. First things first, before we go any further with this discussion, let's just take a moment to appreciate what a great bloody name Void Bastards is. That's just a great title for any video game. Not any video game, specifically this video game. If another game called Void Bastards came out tomorrow, that would just be confusing for everyone, wouldn't it? Anyway, this game caught my eye because I saw a lot of people I follow on Twitter talking about it, beaming about it. I vaguely know Cara Ellison, who worked on the game, a little bit. So that got my interest, caught my eye. The visual style, very reminiscent of that old Shooter 13, which is getting a remaster soon. Sort of that cel-shaded comic book look. In fact, as you can see from the panels enveloping the footage, the whole comic book panel art style is integral to the game's aesthetic. It was also compared to BioShock, but in a roguelike form, and there are certainly some similarities, although if you go in expecting a BioShock experience, you might wind up disappointed. It's not quite that. It does have a lot of roguelike elements, with the sense of randomness as you go in, permadeath for characters, but in the tradition of more modern roguelikes, you get to keep certain elements of progression when you die. But you do lose some consumable resources like ammo and money, so it's not like death is a mere slap on the wrist. But the general idea of it is you are one of the titular Void Bastards. You are a quote-unquote client of a space company, which we'll just say, and you're tasked with going out into the nebula, into the void of space, and collecting various items for the company to build things. You are a prisoner. It's suggested that all of the titular Void Bastards are prisoners and are being more or less forced into this by a very amoral company. So obviously, it's the kind of themes that I'm totally on board with. So you travel through space going from jump point to jump point, stopping at a number of derelict craft along the way. And you can choose to go in or not, but you will have to eventually go into at least some of these spacecrafts because you need to hunt for fuel, for food, for all sorts of resources, and to get crafting materials to improve your gear. And even though there are survival elements, it's more along the Oregon Trail type of game, where you need the fuel to keep moving across space, you need the food to sustain yourself while you're traveling. You don't actually need to worry about that when you're in the first-person shooter gameplay. That's just for the traveling portion of the gameplay. And it's very fun. When it's fun, it's incredible amounts of fun. It's got a great sense of humour to it. It is, pardon me using the phrase, it is quintessentially British. All of the weird space monsters speak with British voice, most of them, and they just say things like, "Oh, shitbird, you're a shitbird. Why are you fucking doing it?" All of that wacky stuff. It's quite fun to hear all the over-the-top cartoony voices. But it can be annoying. That's the caveat that I will offer here. It can be quite an irritating game. When it tries to be challenging, some of the challenges feel less like measured difficulty and more like a measured fuck you to the player, especially if you go on a ship that has a lot of hazards, one that you might need to go on because there's story-relevant materials there you need to acquire, and, you know, you find one that's like one of the conditions, because each ship has its own set of conditions, its own set of enemies that are on board, and it might, like this one you can see here, there's a cloud of smoke, there's smoke clouds throughout this ship that obscure vision. There are worse ones like fire, where everything's on fire and the fire can sometimes envelop entire doorways. And if you don't have a way of dealing with that or a way of mitigating some of the damage, you can just feel a little bit fucked over. And there are various combinations of enemies that are not fun to fight, if I'm being honest. Enemies like the spooks that disappear and reappear and go through doors, they're a pain in the arse. It's just running around waiting for them to appear, trying to pop off shots before they disappear again. And trying to avoid damage from many of the enemies feels a bit futile. They will track and hit you pretty effectively. And none of it's too challenging. It's not so hard that you won't get through it. It's just a slew of little irritations that combine to be largely annoying. But it depends on the randomized elements. That's always a risk with random gameplay where you never know what you might gonna get. So that wasn't a correct sentence. That wasn't a way of speaking at all. And as gorgeous as the game looks, certainly on the Xbox One version that I played on, I've been dealing with quite some overwhelming screen tearing at places. Enough to be quite distracting. For the most part, you don't notice it, but once you do, it becomes impossible. And sometimes it's definitely worse than at other times. Sometimes it's barely there at all, and sometimes the screen is sliced. So that is something to be wary of. But complaints aside, it is still quite fun. As I've tried to stress, I think I've said that way too many times already. It's one of those games that you can find yourself playing for quite some time, just because that loop of traveling, going, acquiring is very satisfying. It's really rewarding as a game. The irritations you put up with are often worth it, and certainly the harder ships have more rewards in them. And you are constantly acquiring enough material at a decent rate to be upgrading your gear, wearing, combat vests that upgrade your health, improving your weapons, earning new weapons. It's really regular, the rate at which you are gaining upgrades, provided you're stopping regularly at ships and being thorough in your collection of stuff. There are difficult enemies such as this one, the Screw. If we were to make Bioshock comparisons so far in my play, these would be the big daddies. And what really strikes me is, even with some of the most infuriating aspects of the game, if you're clever and think about the materials and the resources you have, I should say, not materials, the resources at your disposal, there is some interesting tactical play. For example, this is the cluster flak, try and say it correctly, which, as the name might suggest, drops a cluster bomb. Now, that's very dangerous for you as well as them, but you can lock doors, and most enemies cannot unlock them. So, as dangerous as this Screw is, we throw out a kitty bot, like we've just seen there, to distract them, for the most part. I took a fair chunk of damage there, and then another one joined the party. But, by locking the door and throwing the cluster flak in, I'm trying to say that correctly, you can essentially just trap them in a big kill barrel, which we will see a little bit more of here. And that can be really rewarding when you feel like you've outsmarted the game. Another weapon is there's a Void Rift gun. I can't remember the exact name of it, but you can essentially suck up an enemy. You can blink them out of existence and trap them in the gun, and then respawn them elsewhere at a location of your choosing. Gun turrets are incredibly infuriating in this game, but being able to suck them into a gun, throw them into a room you've already cleared, and then shut the door, and then just forget about them, that's quite fun indeed. You can also earn upgrades that allow you to, first of all, stun electronic equipment, and then take it over. So you can eventually turn gun turrets to your side and actually make use of them rather than have them be a king-size pain in the fucking arse. Because that is, unfortunately, the one big caveat to this game that I've, already told you about. And it's the only complaint I have, but it's a strong recurring complaint. That at times you just feel like the game is going out of its way to infuriate rather than challenge you. It takes just the wrong combination of annoying opponents, the wrong combination of negative traits that can't just be found in ships, but can be found with your character as well. Each character that gets generated upon death can have bonus traits, or it can have negative traits. Something like Sticky Fingers is a positive one, where you automatically pick up materials in the environment without having to explicitly find and pick them up. That's a positive one. You could have one that has a percentage chance of failing to reload the gun and dropping the clip, which ain't fun at all. Or having their health dramatically reduced, or taking more damage from various environmental hazards like radiation. And some of them are fine, some of them you're like, well, this is annoying, I can deal with it. Some of them, like tunnel vision, where all of your peripheral vision is obscured by blackness, that's not really all that entertaining. That's really irritating, if I'm being honest with you. So yeah, one major complaint aside from the screen tearing, but it is a pervasive one. However, in exchange for a compelling game that has you wanting to play more just to keep earning stuff and keep feeling rewarded, yeah, I think I could recommend this to a vast suite of players if you like roguelike stuff, if you do like dealing with all sorts of random challenges where something could be good or it could be really bad. If you like that gamble of gameplay, it's there. Yeah, it's an impressive little game with some flaws, one major flaw, but a lot to find likeable about it. It's got charm to it, and as I say, it is a quintessentially British.
What? You gotta be fucking kidding me!